Have you ever had a moment so embarrassing you wanted to disappear? I walked into the family dinner without realizing I was still wearing my gym clothes and heard everyone laugh behind my back, but the worst part happened when my crush offered me a ride home. I thought I had prepared myself for a simple, casual family dinner. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. Just a quiet Sunday night meal with my parents, my siblings, and a few cousins who were in town. But as soon as I walked through the front door, I realized that simple was never going to be the reality in my family. It was chaotic, loud, and judgmental in a way that left you second, guessing every word you said, every movement you made. I was exhausted from a long day at the gym, my hair still damp from a quick shower that hadn't quite dried, and my outfit was as unprepared as I was, a wrinkled tank top, gym shorts, and sneakers that had seen one too many hours of sweat and treadmill miles. I thought nobody would notice, but apparently, that was wishful thinking. I stepped into the living room, holding my water bottle like it was a lifeline, and immediately felt every eye turn toward me. The conversation stopped mid-laugh, and I could practically hear the collective pause in the air. My stomach sank, and then I heard it. A snicker, followed by the unmistakable laughter of my cousins. The kind of laughter that isn't just funny, it's pointed, cruel, meant to exclude. Is she seriously wearing that? Someone whispered, and the way their voices carried through the room made my cheeks burn hot enough to rival the gym heat I'd just left behind. I froze, my mouth dry, my thoughts scrambling like tangled shoelaces. I had never felt so exposed, so utterly self-conscious in my life. I tried to smile, tried to brush it off with a casual wave as I approached the dining table, but it was like stepping into a spotlight of humiliation. Every movement I made seemed exaggerated, like my limbs were too aware of themselves, too clumsy, too loud. My mom offered a faint smile, the kind that says, just ignore them. But even she looked a little embarrassed, a little unsure of how to handle the situation. My dad muttered something about gym attire at dinner, in that half-serious, half-amused tone that only made things worse. And as I reached my seat, I could hear more whispers, a quiet chorus of judgment that made my stomach churn. Then, as if the embarrassment weren't already at its peak, I noticed him. Liam, my crush. The boy I had been harboring a crush on for months, whose smile made my heart hammer and whose laugh felt like music in my ears. He had been invited by my cousin, who was dating his older sister, and now he was seated across from me, casually leaning back in his chair, effortlessly perfect as always. And of course he noticed too. His eyes flicked down at my tank top, my shorts, my sneakers, and I could see the brief confusion, the flicker of amusement that passed over his features before he quickly masked it with a polite smile. My cheeks flamed hotter, my fingers fidgeted, and I realized that my dream of quietly blending in had been shattered within the first 30 seconds of entering the room. The dinner itself was a minefield. Every anecdote, every joke, every passing comment felt like it was amplified, twisted into ridicule aimed directly at me. My cousins whispered behind their hands, my younger brother snickered in that half-guilty, half-mean way that only siblings can, and my parents kept exchanging glances that I couldn't quite read. Concern, embarrassment, mild amusement. It was impossible to tell. I tried to engage in conversation, to laugh along with the group, but my voice felt foreign, distant, like I was hearing it echo from somewhere else. Every attempt to participate felt like it drew more attention to my appearance, to the absurdity of my gym clothes in a room full of dressed-up relatives. And yet, amidst the chaos, Liam occasionally looked up from his plate, his polite smile returning each time, sometimes accompanied by a soft, "Are you okay?" That made my chest tighten. I wanted to answer, to explain, to apologize for being human in a family that thrived on perfection and appearances. But the words got caught in my throat. I felt trapped between the desire to vanish and the need to maintain some shred of dignity. I watched him interact with my cousins, laughing at their jokes, offering small compliments, and my heart twisted. He was kind, yes, genuinely considerate, but he had no idea that he was the only thing keeping me from melting into the floor in utter humiliation. And then came the food. My mom had outdone herself, as always, with a spread that should have been comforting: roasted vegetables, tender chicken, mashed potatoes, and fresh bread that filled the room with warmth. But I couldn't enjoy a bite. Every movement, every reach for a fork, felt exaggerated, like my clumsy hands were a magnet for ridicule. My gym shorts rode up in a way that made me shift uncomfortably, and the room seemed to hum with the silent commentary of my relatives. I tried to laugh it off when someone joked about my unique sense of style, but it felt hollow, forced, and self-conscious. The latter followed me, a constant, gnawing reminder that I didn't belong, that I had made a mistake by showing up unprepared in a world that judged appearances above all else. I barely noticed when dessert arrived. A simple chocolate cake, warm and soft, should have been a moment of comfort, a fleeting distraction from the chaos, but even then, my family found a way to magnify my embarrassment. Someone commented on how gym clothes were really casual for dessert, and I felt the last shred of composure slip away. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to melt into the floor, into the wall, into anywhere but there. My heart was pounding, my fingers shaking, and my thoughts were a chaotic storm of self, consciousness and regret. And then it happened. My parents insisted on calling everyone outside to see the snow that had just begun to fall. A light, delicate dusting that turned the driveway into a winter wonderland. I followed, reluctantly, my sneakers crunching in the fresh snow. My stomach twisted as Liam stepped closer, offering a polite, "Do you want a ride home?" In that calm, smooth tone that made my heart skip, I froze. The offer should have been flattering, even comforting, but in that moment, it felt like the final blow. I couldn't get past my embarrassment to answer. I imagined everyone in the driveway, my cousins' smirking faces, the laughter that had haunted me all evening, and the thought of stepping into a car with him in this state of humiliation made me want to disappear entirely. Snowflakes drifted down like tiny pieces of paper confetti, soft and slow, as if the sky were trying to soothe the sting of everything that had happened inside. The cold air hit my face and felt cleaner than the heavy atmosphere at the table, but it also sharpened the ache of humiliation. I tucked my arms around myself, wishing I'd at least thrown on a coat over my tank top before leaving the gym. My cousins' voices spilled out of the doorway, teasing in half, laughing as they gathered around the porch rail to take selfies. I stayed back, near the bottom step, hoping the shadows and the falling snow would swallow me whole. Then I heard Liam's voice behind me, closer than I expected. "Hey, you okay?" It wasn't the teasing tone of my cousins, nor the embarrassed mutter of my parents. It was gentle, sincere. He was standing just a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his black jacket, his hair dotted with melting flakes. He didn't look like he was mocking me. He looked concerned. My instinct was to brush him off, to put up the same polite smile I'd used all night. But something about the way he tilted his head, like he genuinely wanted to hear the answer, unraveled me a little. "I'm fine," I muttered automatically. My voice was thin, shaky. "You sure?" His eyebrows knit together. "They were kind of rough on you back there." I stared at him, stunned that he'd noticed. My family had been making me feel invisible for years, and yet in the span of one night, this boy, this crush, had somehow seen straight through it. I hesitated, teeth worrying at my lip. I didn't realize this dinner was such a big deal. I came from the gym. I thought it was going to be casual. Liam gave a soft laugh, but not a cruel one. "It's your family. They should be happy you showed up, not what you're wearing." I blinked at him. He said it so easily, like it was obvious. But to me, it wasn't obvious at all. My family had always measured everything, your grades, your clothes, your friends, against some invisible scale of approval. Showing up wrong wasn't just embarrassing. It was breaking a rule you didn't even know you'd been expected to follow. "I'm used to being the punchline," I said quietly. "I just thought maybe tonight would be different." He tilted his head. "You don't have to explain yourself to them." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "You sound like someone who's never been stuck in a family dinner like this." "Maybe," he said, and his smile was small. Or maybe I just know what it's like to be in a room full of people and feel like you're on the outside." Something in his voice, so even, so soft, made me meet his eyes. For a second, I saw it a flicker of loneliness, the kind I'd always thought was unique to me. It caught me off guard. I'd always assumed he was the kind of person who floated through rooms without ever feeling the sting of rejection. But maybe, just maybe, we weren't so different after all. Behind us, my cousins were still laughing, still filming little TikToks of themselves under the porch light, still oblivious to anything outside their bubble. I could hear my mother's voice, calling out for me to, "Least come smile for one picture," as if that would erase the whole evening. Liam didn't move. He stayed right there in the snow with me, his presence a small, warm anchor against the chill. "Do you want that ride?" he asked softly. "You don't have to go back inside." My first instinct was to say no. The embarrassment clung to me like sweat, and the idea of being in his car, in my gym clothes, felt like pouring salt into an open wound. But then I thought of going back inside, the tight smiles, the whispered jokes, the way my dad's eyes had flicked toward my shorts like they were an offense to the entire dinner table. And suddenly, The idea of leaving didn't sound so bad. Yeah, I said finally. I think I do. He nodded once, like it was decided. We walked toward his car in silence, the snow crunching under our shoes. My cousins barely noticed us slip away. I caught a glimpse of my mother on the porch, her expression unreadable, but she didn't call after me. She just turned back toward the house. The car was warm, the kind of cozy warmth that seeps into your bones after being outside in the cold. The smell of pine air freshener and something faintly like coffee filled the space. Liam started the engine and didn't speak for a while, just let the radio hum low in the background. I stared out the window, watching the snow blur into streaks under the streetlights, trying to untangle the knot in my chest. You know, he said finally, breaking the silence, it's weird. The way they all looked at you tonight. Like they were waiting for you to trip. It's not normal. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to defend my family. They were mine, after all, but another part of me felt the truth of his words like a bruise being pressed. They've always been like that, I said. It's not new. Doesn't mean it's okay. I glanced at him. His eyes stayed on the road, but his jaw was set, his hands firm on the steering wheel. We drove in silence for a few more minutes, the radio playing a soft, melancholy song. My embarrassment was still there, but it had shifted. It wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was something heavier, something like grief. For years, I'd convinced myself I was imagining it. The way my family's jokes always seemed to land a little harder on me. The way my successes were brushed aside while my mistakes were magnified. But tonight had been undeniable, and Liam had seen it. I wanted to ask him why he cared. I wanted to know what he was thinking. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I sat there, the hum of the car filling the silence, the snow still falling outside, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, the sense that maybe I wasn't completely alone in this. As we turned down my street, I realized my hands had stopped trembling. The shame was still there, but muted now, like a distant echo. When he pulled up to my house, he didn't rush me out of the car. He just sat there for a moment, looking at me. You didn't deserve that, he said simply. I swallowed hard. Thanks for the ride. I managed. My voice cracked, but I hoped he didn't notice. He gave me a small smile. Anytime. When I stepped out of the car, the cold air bit at my skin again, but it felt different now, cleaner, sharper, less suffocating. I watched his taillights disappear down the street before turning toward my front door. The house was dark, quiet. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but for the first time all night, I felt like I had a choice. Inside, I slipped off my sneakers and walked straight to my room without turning on the lights. My phone buzzed with messages, probably family group texts, probably more jokes, but I ignored it. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my gym clothes, and stared at the faint reflection of myself in the window. I didn't look like someone who just survived a public humiliation. I looked calm. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because someone had finally seen me. Maybe it was because I'd left before the night could break me. Or maybe, for the first time in years, I was beginning to realize that their laughter didn't have to define me anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a lingering ache in my chest that no amount of sleep could erase. My room felt quieter than usual, almost painfully still, as if the world outside had gone on without noticing the storm of embarrassment I'd endured the night before. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything: the laughter, the whispers, Liam's presence, and the way his quiet concern had cut through all of it like a small, sharp knife. Somehow, that small act of kindness had unbalanced me more than the ridicule ever could. I wasn't sure if I should feel relief, gratitude, or confusion. All I knew was that I couldn't shake the replay of my family's laughter, their pointed comments, or the way my face had burned in the soft glow of the dining room chandelier. By mid-morning, I had received dozens of text messages, notifications popping up on my phone like tiny alarms. My cousins had already begun posting snippets of the evening on social media, blurry videos of my awkward entrance, screenshots of group chats filled with teasing comments. My stomach dropped. The humiliation had not ended with dinner, it had multiplied. My heart raced as I scrolled, and the knot in my chest tightened with every post. I could almost hear their laughter echoing through my apartment, the invisible chains of judgment reaching across the screen. I considered deleting the apps entirely, cutting myself off from this small window of cruelty, but something inside me stopped. I wanted to see, to know the full extent of it, even if it hurt. Liam's message was the first that appeared in the flood of notifications. I hesitated before opening it. My fingers trembled slightly as I tapped the screen. Hey, don't let them get to you. Seriously. Those 5 words were like a lifeline, small and fragile, but enough to remind me that I wasn't entirely alone. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling a strange combination of warmth and vulnerability. The contrast between the cruelty of my family and the simplicity of his concern was dizzying. I wanted to respond, to thank him, to say something witty or clever, but my usual tendency to overthink and self-edit took over. Instead, I just stared at the message, letting it linger, feeling the faint spark of connection amid the lingering embarrassment. By afternoon, I had decided that I couldn't sit and stew in my humiliation any longer. I needed to reclaim some control over the situation. I got up, showered, changed into normal clothes, not gym clothes this time, and decided to confront the fallout on my own terms. I texted a few friends outside of my family, people who had always been neutral observers, and asked them to meet me for coffee. As I walked through the streets, the crisp air felt invigorating, the mundane rhythm of everyday life helping to ground me. I realized that no matter how harsh the night had been, it didn't have to define my entire existence. At the cafe, I explained the situation, showing them the screenshots, replaying the moments that had hurt the most. My friends were sympathetic, some outraged, others quietly supportive. They reassured me, offered advice, and reminded me of my worth beyond my family's narrow standards. Liam's message came again while I sat there, this time longer, more considered. You handled yourself well last night, even if it didn't feel like it. People will notice more than you think. I couldn't help but smile. The validation didn't erase the pain, but it gave me a subtle shield against it. The evening approached, and I knew that another encounter with my family was inevitable. They expected me to act as if nothing had happened, to smile politely, to pretend that the night's humiliation was insignificant. I debated what to do, whether to hide, avoid eye contact, or confront the awkwardness head-on. And then came the message I had been simultaneously dreading and anticipating: Liam's invitation. He wanted to come by and pick me up to grab dinner, not a casual ride, not a hand-me-down excuse for attention, but an intentional, deliberate gesture of reaching out. My stomach twisted. The thought of being in his presence again, post-embarrassment, made me simultaneously anxious and excited. I hesitated at first, pacing in my apartment, wondering if this was a mistake. What if he remembered my gym clothes, my awkward laugh, my fumbling attempts to be graceful? What if the night only magnified my embarrassment instead of providing relief? But then I realized that the longer I waited, the more I allowed my anxiety to grow. I needed to face it, to reclaim my sense of dignity and agency. With a deep breath, I confirmed that I would meet him. When he arrived, I opened the door to find him leaning casually against his car, the faintest snow still clinging to his hair from the morning. His smile was reassuring, the kind that communicated confidence without arrogance. I noticed his gaze linger on me for a moment, not mockingly, not critically, but with a calm, quiet interest that made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't anticipated. As we drove toward the restaurant, the tension in the car was palpable yet oddly comforting. We didn't speak immediately, the music played softly, a buffer against the awkwardness that hummed between us. Eventually, he broke the silence. So, last night was rough. I think you could say that, I replied, trying to keep my voice light but failing. My cheeks flushed involuntarily. He nodded. You handled it better than I would have. I probably would have frozen completely. I froze. Just not publicly, I admitted, feeling a little of the weight lift from saying it aloud. We laughed quietly, a soft release of tension, and for a moment, I allowed myself to relax. The embarrassment still lingered, but it was no longer sharp, no longer cutting. Liam's presence, his deliberate kindness, gave me space to breathe, to think, to imagine what might come next. And as we approached the restaurant, I realized that the night's ordeal had done something unexpected. It had prepared me for this moment, for facing vulnerability with courage, for letting someone see me despite the chaos. We arrived at the restaurant, and it felt like stepping into a different world entirely. The warm glow of the lights, the hum of quiet conversation, the faint scent of garlic and fresh bread. It was soothing in a way my house never could be. For the first time since the family dinner, I felt like a human being rather than a punchline. Liam held the door open for me, and I stepped inside, adjusting my jacket and smoothing my hair. I could see other diners glancing our way, but none of them laughed. None of them whispered. None of them made me feel like I was the center of some cruel cosmic joke. We were seated near the window, where the snow continued to fall in soft, steady flakes. Liam seemed relaxed, casually browsing the menu, but I noticed him stealing glances at me, checking for reactions, for smiles, for signs that I was finally feeling comfortable. I tried to calm my racing heart, to breathe normally, to act as if this evening wasn't monumental in its own quiet way. Yet, with each passing second, I felt a mix of anticipation and lingering self-consciousness. What would happen if someone from my family saw me here, smiling, enjoying myself? Would it feel like betrayal or liberation? "I'm glad you agreed to come out," Liam said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "I wanted to make sure you didn't have to spend the evening feeling miserable alone." I swallowed, unsure how to respond. Thanks. It means a lot," I murmured, realizing that it wasn't just the words, it was the gesture, the thoughtfulness, the intent behind them. For the first time in months, maybe even years, someone had taken the time to consider how I felt without judgment, without teasing, without a hidden motive. I felt a flush of gratitude that was almost overwhelming. As the night went on, we talked about everything and nothing. The latest shows we were watching, music we liked, the absurdity of our mutual friends, and the quirks of our high school days. The conversation flowed easily, and I realized that laughter could exist without cruelty, that connection could exist without competition. My embarrassment from the previous night had softened, replaced by a sense of security I hadn't thought possible. Liam wasn't laughing at me, he was laughing with me, and it made a world of difference. After dessert, as we stepped outside into the crisp night air, I felt a strange mix of hesitation and anticipation. Liam leaned slightly closer as we walked toward his car, and I noticed a subtle shift in his expression, something gentler, more vulnerable. "I want you to know," he said softly, "that last night, none of that reflects who you are. You're amazing, even when the world's being ridiculous." I felt my chest tighten. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. The words weren't just comforting, they were validating. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile that didn't hide fear or shame. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling my confidence grow with each step. "It means more than you know." He returned the smile, and for a moment, everything else, the laughter, the whispers, the judgment, fell away. I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long while. As he drove me home, the silence between us was comfortable, almost intimate. I realized that the night had changed me. The humiliation I had felt, the awkwardness, the embarrassment, it had all been a crucible. It forced me to confront vulnerability, to experience discomfort, and ultimately, to recognize my own resilience. And Liam's quiet support had amplified that realization, reminding me that genuine connection doesn't demand perfection. When we arrived at my house, I hesitated before stepping out of the car. My parents' windows were dark, and I couldn't be sure if anyone had seen me, but for the first time, I didn't care. I had survived the evening, faced my family's judgment, and experienced kindness from someone who truly saw me. "Good night," Liam said, his voice soft, carrying warmth and reassurance. "Good night," I replied, stepping onto the sidewalk, feeling lighter than I had in months. I walked inside, quietly closing the door behind me, and for the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge something I had been avoiding. The embarrassment didn't define me. My worth wasn't tied to my family's approval or to a single humiliating night. And perhaps most importantly, I realized that moments of connection and kindness, no matter how small, could transform even the darkest experiences into something meaningful. That night, lying in bed, I finally felt a sense of closure, a sense of empowerment, and the quiet hope that, despite the pain, the future might hold more understanding, more laughter, and more moments where I could be myself, fully and unapologetically. What do you think about this story? Did you expect this ending? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you want to see more.